Welcome to Hill and Hult, Chapter 1, 3 Mini-Cases. Now, this is something that normally I would let you read these mini-cases in Chapter 1. I think these are very useful mini-cases. And I think what's great about the Hill and Hult textbook is it does have these very brief cases that illustrate some important aspects of what we're talking about. And I especially like these 3 mini-cases in Chapter 1 because they illustrate some aspects of globalization. And I think another thing that unites them is something that Thunderbird is putting a new emphasis on as well, and that is some aspects of what we could call the Fourth Industrial Revolution. Now, Thunderbird, of course, is known for being an institution that focuses on global business and global management and everything global. And that's what makes Thunderbird unique. All of the faculty, all of the courses, everything focuses very much on international management and doing things globally. And we attract students that want to go work overseas and want to live in other countries and want to learn new languages and learn new cultures. And so that's what makes Thunderbird unique. That's its core strength. But our very exciting and innovative new dean of Thunderbird, Dr. Sanjeev Kagram, he himself, of course, is very global, but he also wants us to focus increasingly as well on what he is referring to as the Fourth Industrial Revolution. Now, that is the implications of that, in other words, for global managers. What is the Fourth Industrial Revolution? Well, that's just a term that was developed by we could call it a global think tank called the World Economic Forum based in Geneva, Switzerland. And in fact, Dr. Kagram, the dean of Thunderbird, was honored as a young man for being a young global leader. This is something that every year the World Economic Forum does. They pick some rising star in the global business environment, and they say this person is a young global leader. And Dr. Sanjeev Kagram received that honor some years back. And so he wants us to notice that leaders are being increasingly challenged, global leaders, by this Fourth Industrial Revolution. And what does that mean? It's advances in technology that we're seeing that are happening at an accelerating pace. In the early part of the 21st century, we're seeing advances in robotics, in autonomous vehicles, in things like the Internet of Things, and advances in telecommunications. And so this is creating some new opportunities for global managers and global leaders, but also some potential challenges as well. And so I think that that interesting aspect that we're also talking about a lot here at Thunderbird. Of course, our core business, our core competitive advantage at Thunderbird is global business and global management, but we also want to pay attention to these new developments that are happening in the global economy related to this Fourth Industrial Revolution, these very rapid advances in technology and the sorts of challenges they present and the opportunities they present for global managers. And so the reason I think it's relevant to mention this in the context of these 3 mini cases, the mini cases deal with Uber and Boeing and medical tourism, is that if you notice, each one of those is something that takes advantage, right, of these new developments in the internet and apps and medical tourism, taking advantage of some opportunities that never existed before, but now with this incredible advances in technology, we see a whole new industry springing up. So I just wanted to call your attention to that. But let's now turn to these mini cases. And by the way, so these are things that I will ask you about on Yellow Dig. And of course, I hope you're following the instructions about Yellow Dig and how to post comments on that and how to receive points on that. And the questions from the mini cases will be something that you'll have to respond to on Yellow Dig, right? So this first mini case on Uber, I think is especially interesting and relevant. And I think many of you, of course, would have experienced Uber by now and use this service, which of course takes advantage of a technology that didn't exist, some time ago, but now, of course, is prevalent in our daily lives. And of course, that's the internet. But Uber is, of course, this essentially taxi service, right? But Uber is challenging taxi services around the world. And I thought that what's great about this mini case is if you read through it, you'll see their approach to this. They are brilliant technologically, but I think perhaps some of the Uber managers, when they created their business model, did not fully understand or appreciate to the extent that we might want them to, someone at Thunderbird, a Thunderbird train manager might have, some of the nuances of global cultures and some of the ways of doing business internationally that would have made them more successful. So if you see that some of the ways that they actually enter new markets are quite interesting. Sometimes they are banned, as you see, right? Their strategy is confrontational. Sometimes they are banned in many cities. And sometimes one of the things they do is they don't care. They go in to the city anyway, and then they get social networks, writers to pressure local governments, talking on the internet, on Twitter, and so on. Hey, we want Uber. Please give us Uber, And so this is some way that they are pressuring governments to kind of allow Uber to exist. And so this is an approach, of course, that could have happened some years back. This is a sort of a new challenge, a new interesting way of doing things. But again, I think what some of the Uber managers apparently lack is that, their sort of confrontational approach may backfire in some countries. And we see some competitors to Uber emerging in some countries that where the local competitors are more sensitive to the local customs and local traditions and ways of doing things. So I think what's interesting about this mini case, and I think it's a very brief case, but it does raise some very interesting topics about global strategy and about some of these new technologies, but it does bring us back to the core understandings that we need to be sensitive culturally to new cultures and new ways of doing things, need to be adapted in some ways to the local cultures and local tradition. So I think that's what is interesting, and I'd like you to talk about this on Yellow Dig. What are the pros and cons to Uber's strategy? How could Uber have done things differently? I'll leave that for the Yellow Dig discussion. I will intervene and comment on some of your discussions. I'll leave some of that to you. But this, I think, is a very important topic for us to think about in the context of our Module 1, understanding the global business environment. And clearly, we are seeing globalization happening. And there are clearly some benefits to this, but companies that are taking advantage of these new technologies and these new opportunities provided by globalization also need to remember to be culturally sensitive. So that's an interesting case in itself. Now, the other interesting thing, we have another interesting mini case on Boeing and its global production system. And I think what's interesting here is Boeing, very exciting developments with the 787 Dreamliner and outsourcing to so many suppliers. And of course, this is the model that we have talked about it again and again. The liberals say that's fine. Outsource manufacturing to other lower cost locations. Economic nationalists have a debate about that. Structuralists see that as, oh, we're just exploiting workers now in poor countries, right? But the bottom line is that Boeing, of course, was happily doing this, increasing its profits margins by doing this. But then they saw there was some disadvantage to this, right? There are reasons they did this, not only for lower costs. Sometimes they did it because countries where they wanted to sell their planes were demanding this, right? So there were political reasons sometimes for doing this. So that's another aspect of doing business globally that, if you're just looking at the cost-benefit models, that also needs to be taken. These kinds of political factors sometimes need to be taken into account. And then there's another issue that sometimes the suppliers weren't necessarily producing things well. And so that had some risks as well. So these are some aspects of this mini case that I think bring up some very important issues and maybe even make us question to some extent, do we need to rethink the outsourcing strategy that liberals have condoned and said is such a great thing? Could there even be some shortcomings to this, even for companies? So that's something to think about as well. And then finally, of course, the medical tourism. This is a new way of thinking about globalization. And again, the benefits of globalization. But you know what? If you outsource reading of MRI scans, and these are sort of the very sophisticated images that technology allows us to take of the human body now, we can identify sort of where the problem is and where the tumor is or where the growth, whatever it is, very quickly. But now a lot of this, the reading of these scans can be outsourced, right, to foreign countries with lower costs, and their doctors are less expensive than in the United States, right? So what are the implications of this? as well. So again, the liberals might have one view of this, economic nationalists another, structuralists another altogether. But again, so this is another aspect of this globalization phenomenon. And of course, as you can see, taking advantage of the opportunities provided by these new technologies. In other words, we could call it, as the World Economic Forum calls it, the fourth industrial revolution taking place before our eyes. So I think this is what's very exciting. We're living in a very exciting times, and it's a great time to be doing international business. But this course and these kinds of courses that you're going to get in your Thunderbird program will make you aware of not only the challenges that you might encounter as an international manager and how to overcome them, but also some amazing opportunities that you might not even have thought about without getting this Thunderbird education. So that's what this course is going to be about, and that's my introduction to these 3 mini cases.